Welcome to this fabulous new series of conversations with wonderful women who share themselves with us openly. We're here to inspire and support women to freely talk about the important parts of their lives. There is no being perfect or scripts in this series. While you are warmly invited to listen in and contribute with your comments, we are not providing professional services or advice from this podcast or the guests. The conversation is for private, non-commercial use, and our guests do not necessarily reflect any organisations they work for. Now, please enjoy being part of real conversations that take us way beyond the small talk. Good morning, Lou. It's absolute delight to have you here this morning on our new series of Beyond the Small Talk. We're getting into conversations, as you know, for women about real things that are going on in their life and what's important to them. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. It's lovely to be here with you, Frances. I'm really enjoying chatting with you.
Thanks, Lou. You and I spent probably the most time together online, just like this, during 2020 in the pandemic when we were locked down. Now, you were in a situation where you had a lot more restrictions on your life at that point. And we got to know each other a little bit better, but I'd love for you to share what is important to you and where you're at with things in your life.
Yes, it's a lovely question, and one that we very often don't ask people. So I'm really happy that you're asking it. The things that are important to me, if I look, is freedom. The freedom to be in all aspects of my life, engaged in it, and free to act within that. And it leads me into the discovery of who I am that plays small sometimes, that doesn't really take on or engage deeply in things. So I guess the basis of my call would be, my life in America and also my life here in Australia, given that I have 3 grown-up children here and I have elderly parents. And in America, I have my wife. So I have almost like 2 lives, and I don't live outside of a context of when I'm there, this is so, and when I'm here, this is so. There's a lot more, as I explore my life, there's a lot more freedom than just choosing one or the other way of being. And I noticed that for me, what's important inside of that is that people feel cared for, people feel loved. So during the pandemic, of course, there were big gaps in being able to physically presence myself. And when my elderly parents, when my father went into a home, into an aged care facility for the first time, due to my stepmother having a fall and doing damage to her spine, which required spinal surgery, there were all kinds of feelings and emotions that went with being offshore and not, with the international borders closed, having no way to kind of really just physically be there. So when I say about feeling free, what I really mean is aligning myself with what is, just okay. So I'm unable to physically take part in some of the recovery activities I wanted to do. And at the same time, I'm a person that loves people to feel cared for. And if that is the single one thing that I look at in my life, it's why I decided to become a therapist. I've also worked in hospitality. And again, it's the generosity of creating it like wherever you are in the world, that hotel is like a second home to you. And it's being that face for people. So online, working in therapy situations, it's important to me, but actually physically as well. As soon as I could come to feasibly come to Australia to come be with my parents, I had all the support in the world of my wife to come and extend that level of myself, because I really believe it's at a deeper level than just the logical level of being. And it's not what's important to everybody. I've been looking at since I've been here. I used to have a group of friends who we would get together and we would have a meal at each other's house once a month. So it was all a shared sort of thing, and we would play card games, and we just really have lots of fun for one evening a month where we all came together. And while I was offshore in America, those same friends in Tasmania didn't meet once. And since I've been back, we met in my back garden because one of them is not vaccinated. And so we had like a garden dinner party that ended at like 2 o'clock in the morning. We didn't play cards, but we disappeared 2 years of time. So for me, bringing people together, having people feel cared for, that's what's really important.
Thank you. And my experience of you is that I always feel cared for when I'm with you. You have a deep curiosity of what people are up to, and it's just this genuine love and connection. And I think that's why I feel like we formed a friendship so easily, and I can imagine you do that in lots of spaces of your life. And that reminds me of what you said at one stage when we were meeting online, when I was hosting some calls to bring anyone together who felt like they wanted connection in that sort of isolated stage. You mentioned that the connection with Australians just being in a space where you could hear us talk with our accent and all of that, how important that was for you.
Yes, it definitely was. It allowed me to relax. My wife would comment, because she speaks with an American accent, and she would comment, as soon as you get with your people from Australia, I physically see your shoulders go down. It's like, oh, you're with people that there's a feeling of home. And considering that I had emigrated to Australia from England, there was, constantly this inquiry in how to feel at home when culturally, or the accents, all of these things were different. And so I guess it brings me to what's really important to me, or what I think is important to talk about, being, people being at home with each other, people being willing to be vulnerable, or people willing to treat people like family. Like, there's a sense of belonging that goes with home that you could say it would be a missing if you don't experience that. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with my Australian family and friends, and I'm grateful to be with because during the pandemic also, all of my English relatives on my dad's side, particularly in terms of worry or concern for my dad and my stepmom, because her limited ability to have community around her was not just the pandemic, but also caring for my dad, who has quite advanced dementia. So the types of conversations you have with dad were not, growing conversations necessarily, only in the sense of looking at myself or herself, in the case of my stepmom, what she felt the need to provide in that environment for him to belong on the screen with all his relatives from England. and how they would be able to break through any discomfort in being faced with someone who you're going to have the same conversation with multiple times in 5 or 10 minutes. And I noticed that's one place where I could say I'm very similar to my stepmom. We have quite a mothering side to our personality, and that's not all of it. Like, that's not all of what we have, but it's something that I'm very endeared to her, that she provides quite a bit of mothering towards my dad, in his maybe what you might call clumsiness and forgetfulness and all of that. So yeah, it's very important to me, I guess, to also constantly look with curiosity at who I'm being. When I have a belief, I like to play with words, Francis. So whatever my belief is, that is who I'll show up as, how I'll be and live. Belief, be and live. So the curiosity of my beliefs, and I mean, some of my beliefs work for me really well and create a lot of happiness, but some of my beliefs don't. So it's where I go into what I think of as inquiry, and just to keep looking at, well, there are so many different ways to look at things, so many different opinions. Like my opinion about feeling endeared towards my stepmom, that feeling of endearment brings up for me full engagement. And like, I can understand rather than know, terminology wise, rather than know how she's being, I can understand, being a mother myself, I can understand the space that provides. And, I guess just to keep looking at where would my belief be that my dad needs that? If in general, now that he's in a home, he's not receiving that. So like I said, some of my beliefs, they work for me, and some of my beliefs don't work for me. Some of my beliefs have an edge that takes me out on the skinny branches, I call it, and out on the edge of how I believe things should be. And of course, there's nothing like an illness in the family, whether it's pain, whether it's dementia, no matter what it is, there's nothing like a physical sensation for it to appear real, like really real. I've got, if I look at myself, I have a belief and an experience or an understanding of lower back pain. So I'm constantly in the inquiry of who is it that gets to be free around my back pain? Now, clearly it's something physical. So I would also link that with my personality, because within my frame and my form, there is how I live my life that created the problem. And sometimes I would think of it as a problem, and other times I would think of it as a way of being. So my lower lumbar area, being that I work as a therapist, I'm trained to experience through my own physical body what's there. The lower lumbar representing giving a lot. So it's like bending over backwards to care for or give, so some of my beliefs will work for me about how I should be, should being the operative word there. And what is freedom if I just allow myself to care without doing something about that situation? And in fact, it goes back to sometimes the things I talk about in therapy. Where can I delegate? Where can I cooperate and co-produce life, coordinate with the directives that I think are important, and coordinate those with others to bring things together to their fullness, and not like it's as a result of my particular labor, but more as a result of my particular skill in inquiring into all the pieces that I'd like to bring together, creating something, and then speaking that so that other people come together on the same thing. Those that also find that's important have an opportunity to hear themselves in what I'm saying. So for me, looking at my spinal posture, looking at also the way I live my life, it's going to impact all areas of my physical self. And I used the word before about rather than knowing, there's the impact of understanding. So again, as I said before, I like to play with words. So if my body stands under my management team, my mind, if my body stands under me, then I understand me. Now, to be understood over there with somebody else who stands under themselves with a different belief, this is usually the crux of the matter. Yet it's to be generous with other people's belief, because as they believe, so they will be and live. And inside of that is a great freedom to inquire for those that choose to take that up. And aligning with what's so is the path of least resistance, because that's what's so. So loving what is like loving that my dad went into a home, loving that my stepmom had the injury that she had, because that's the what's so. And what's next, what could be generated as evolution and as a real rounding out and a fullness of this experience. Not only do I get to utilize what is important to me in caring for, caring about, and sometimes action, but also drawing on resources from outside of myself, or looking into ways to support rather than jump in and try and do everything myself, which is the bend over backwards part. So it's really a level of understanding, and then passing that level of understanding on. Whatever you believe is how you will be and live in your life. And what works for you, and what doesn't could stand up to a good deal of inquiry and curiosity to look.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you, and I acknowledge you for everything that you do have going on in your world at the moment with your family, and I know that you've returned to Australia to care for them, so I can understand why there's some back pain resonating in your body at the moment. I've certainly lived with that my whole life, and I've always looked for reasons, as you say, in the structural way of being around it, because I'm tall and I played a lot of sport and all of that world of it. And I constantly am in the inquiry of acceptance. I think that's what you're talking about, pointing to with the accepting the what's so. And I had a friend say to me the other day, he was taking on saying, so what, now what? Which is in the vein of what you're sort of pointing to there. So thank you. You've mentioned the therapy space that you work in. I find it absolutely fascinating. How did you get into that field, and what how do you feel that's making a difference to people that you're working with?
I think the first thing I want to say that is just about being related. Like the difference that my work made to me was it helped me to create acknowledgement of my life and my body and the way I am. It helped create an understanding of that, but also this feeling of relaxing, like there wasn't anything wrong there, that it was also a way of looking because someone only had to say to me in my therapy situation when I first got into this work, oh, your shoulder height is unbalanced, like one shoulder is slightly higher than the other. And so the two sides of the body are like, they're not completely symmetrical, and they're not exactly the same. And some people will look to compensate in certain ways through their physical body that is part of their ongoing posture. And having someone point that out in my body, and then we would explore together what difference it would make to, so like I was saying with my lumbar spinal curve, my lower lumbar, so they call that lordosis is the technical term for that. But there's other spinal curves as well, but this is my particular one. And so what way of being actually caused that I was totally unconscious of? This was the thing that really drew me into this as a living experience for myself, but also something like when I would say to people with their in a one-to-one and in-person session, everything from the way they crossed their legs, or the way they sat, the way their hips were either back in the chair or forward at the edge of the chair, which foot was in front of the other, all of these different presentations, if you like, are totally unconscious. We're not really looking after our body language 24/7. And it's been interesting to expand that into looking at facial expressions and micro expressions. When I met you, we talked a little bit about the face reading that I do, because like any ongoing work you might do at a gym, when you do gym workouts, any areas of your body that you work out more than others, they will start to develop in those areas. The muscles will stand out more, and also the lines on the skin. So there's all kinds of little ways that our face moves that's totally unconscious, because we've been using our face since we were little children, and in fact babies, to respond to things even before we had language. So our facial muscles are well set up to express how we are. And it's why I loved the work I got involved in terms of I could always spot the lie, because the facial expression would be incongruent with what was being said. So not that I walk around wondering whether people are lying or not, but once you have this information, it's really, really like to enlarge on what's the truth sitting behind that, and what's the belief that's in the way. Beliefs are not bad, religious beliefs are not bad, but how do people actually live into their beliefs? What's really going to open up? And so as I learned more and more what my face was saying about me to those trained to read that, I could see, oh yeah, like why didn't I explore that? What they're saying ever before was that there was something about what was expressed, or what I was looking at as a child growing up. And this information wasn't available to me then, or the person's, or it wasn't my time to journey into a new conversation over what was happening. There was a lot of victim mentality about me. And, you know, like I often wondered too, like, is the level of care that I like to extend to people, is that really coming from, you know, trying to make people feel better, rather than just aligning with what's so? Sometimes, you know, what I'm conscious of will be expressed in my face, and then there'll still be layers that I'm not conscious of. Like things like when I was singing, sometimes I would notice when on a recording that my face would, or my mouth would move in a different I thought, I didn't realize I looked like that. And a lot of people, when they hear a recording of themselves, they go, oh, that sounds dreadful, or I didn't know I sounded like that. It's really an interesting exploration to have, because we fall unconscious to what energy we have, or what is the level of truth that our being wants to express. And when I say our being, I'm not necessarily talking about through our job, through our personality. Where are the restrictions on ourselves due to a conversation earlier in life that, oh, that's not nice to say that, or one shouldn't say things like that. If you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all. So there's lots of ways in which our muscles in our face, our bodies, just like Debbie saying, my wife saying that I relax when I'm talking to Australians, it's like my body responds to what I'm engaging with. So in terms of my work, where that makes a difference with someone else is that I become profoundly related. I will very often copy some gestures that they're making, whether it's postural or even with my face, to get a feeling of what that feels like, because it's muscles I might be unconscious of because I don't use those. So it's really also like that feeling of, I know them so well. Like you know how when you go out sometimes and you look in a venue for all the faces or the people that you know, and you'll aim for those people in a crowded room. But what about the sea of almost like faceless ones, you know, that you might apologize to if you trip over their handbag, or you might notice that someone has a disability or whatever, but you'll still aim for the people that you know, because there's a familiarity. And so what my work allows me to do is to be related with people that I don't know at all. It enables me to gain a relatedness through physical form, posture, and facial expressions that enables me to then converse with them just as if I've known them all my life.
What a gift. Yeah, and it's a privilege when people will participate in that with you and share of themselves. And you know, I acknowledge the space that you hold for people to be able to do that and create that relatedness, and what a difference that does make. Kind of always been like that for you. Do you remember, it might have been instances that do stick in your mind of situations where you were really you know, really restricted, really restrained from being self-expressed? Because that's something I'm really interested in inquiring about with women, because there are a lot of women still in a stage of their life where they haven't developed a capacity with that, and that feeling of resistance from sharing themselves and knowing how much of themselves to bring to a situation, whether it be walking into the pub, you know, making yourself physically smaller so people don't notice you, you know, that social anxiety that my friends talk about, what a difference that makes there. So there was a question in all of that. Did that translate?
Yes, no, it did. Was there some way in which I've remember restriction? Well, yes, there is. I remember a restriction one day at a Mind, Body, Spirit Expo, where I was sitting with a different person every 10 minutes in a chair doing face readings with that person. And there was one particular day where I noticed me close. I just noticed on some level I shrank, and I'll just express it like this. I was disability phobic. It just occurred as a physical thing. That was my primary restriction, and it no longer exists. Like, really, I could see how that had me limited, because there was a person with a particular physical disability that I also thought, because of the way their face moved as well, had some kind of mental, and I did not want to do a face reading with that person. I felt like I didn't want to know them. And so like it's the unexplored restriction in my mind. It probably sounds like a hateful kind of thing. It's just an unexplored thing that they are too different. And it comes from comparison. And I looked at it also is, what are the limits on my compassion, on my generosity? What are the limits? And how I self-imposed those. It was like a physical sensation that I couldn't pretend didn't happen. And somebody else did that person's face reading, and it was just a joy to watch. And can you imagine being a person with physical disability entering a world where everyone, well, a lot of people might have exactly the reaction to you that I had at that time to that person. So it brought about this deep healing of how much I tried to enforce myself to be the same as all others. I love the movie Happy Feet. Have you ever seen it? I love that movie because all penguins have a song, right? And he didn't have a song, but he had these magical dancing feet. So like, just like in that moment, how would it be to be loved for your differences, or to be approached because something is different, like a different language, like a different accent? So inside of what I noticed about myself, I experienced the restriction. And I think any level of trauma to a person will also bring up that physical restriction on some level whenever they're faced with similar or certain circumstances. And who would they be if they could get to the other side? Now, it didn't change how I responded in that second with that restriction. But what it did, it opened something new. By having the closing, this is why I think even negative beliefs are an access point to something on the quantum realm, something outside of right and wrong, something that is bigger than ourselves. And that, the only thing I can call that at this stage that has language is curiosity and inquiry. Staying in the possible or the unlimited possibilities of ways to be. And sometimes the areas that we close can also be access points to those. So not like they're bad, not like beliefs are bad, but they only take us so far. And I think that the work that I've loved doing is an access point to something beyond what was there before. So I hope that answers the question. What had me closed or what had me restricted?
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a beautiful example. And thank you for sharing something, as you say, that it could appear in lots of ways for someone to hear that you had that reaction, because there are lots of shoulds about how inclusive we should be. And it is potentially an ideal, idealistic way of expecting people to be, because we do, when you say we walk into a pub and we look for our friends, what we're actually doing is looking for people who are similar to us in a lot of ways. We know that to be so. And so it's a perfect example of where there isn't freedom around that. You were restricted in that moment, and it could be that, or it could be someone who has an opinion that's different from you, and being able to stay with why am I reacting that way? What is it over here with me that is causing that? And finding that for yourself gives you something totally freeing in my experience with that. And I certainly can relate to having instances like that. So thank you for sharing. I wanted to ask you about your family. And I know that any mother has lots of things over the course of raising children and then having them go off into the world that cause us the sleepless nights and all of that sort of thing. And you and I have spoken about family before and what's going on in life. How is everything in that realm for you at the moment, especially being separated from your children in different countries? I understand that must be a lot for you to have in life.
Well, the first the first thing that comes to me is, oh, why did I worry? Honestly, it's the first thing that comes to me. And I understand that to engage with the worry of mothering and, to be there for my kids, to still provide care, even though they're grown-ups, what is the level of care that they need? They don't need the day-to-day level of care anymore. And how can I provide it from overseas? Well, I think for me, I would probably talk about my trans son, Malcolm, here with you, because there is so much loneliness inside of his experience. Lonely in that I don't think anybody else in our family genetically has a gene to not want to be a girl when they were born a girl, or not want to be a boy when they were born a boy. There are a few family members, but not close ties. And just, like looking at, this is my child, rather than this is a gender or a sex. Why it happened, the trying to logic the illogical, trying to understand something that is outside of my experience. So I guess where I'm at with it as a mother is every day coming to everybody in my life, you included, completely fresh, like I don't know anything about you. Because inside of today, there's that thing that you were pointing to with looking for your friends. They're like-minded, or they know you, but it's the knowing that can sometimes get in the way. So if I know my son to be a daughter that I called Elise at her birth, and I know that, like, it's saying no to anything outside of that. It's saying N-O, not K-N-O-W. If I understand, I stand under that this is my child, I'm free to choose what I understand, because it doesn't have the hard edges of logic. I knew she was born into a girl's body. However, he does not relate to that body. So if I want to be related over there, I have to have the freedom around choice, the freedom around who I get to be inside of that relationship. And if I don't want to explore that, I've known when Malcolm, his name is, has been admitted to the psych ward, the locked psych ward, for having attempted suicide. And when you're offshore and these things are going on, of course there's the survival instinct, but that's not really living forward into any possibility for our relationship. It's grounded in fear. Survival is grounded in fear, and then there's no possibility for that relationship to birth roses, to grow and develop. So for me, again, looking at what I believe as a mum, what I believe about him that was formerly a her, what I believe about how a mother should or shouldn't respond, and what was deeply important to me with her becoming a him was that he could see there wasn't a resistance there. Because what I got during one of our conversations when he had attempted suicide, there was something very deep and guttural for me around, I didn't want him to die alone. Like, I didn't want him to take his life. So I just said to him, if you were to call me when you're pretty certain that you're going, that is all I would ask. And that's only if you're conscious enough to do that.
Mm.
Like, there's a thing for me of, I saw him into the world, I'd like to see him out of it, because that's not usual for a parent. And it's not about making me feel better. It's about going to what's important to me, is being related to my son, who was a daughter that could be on his way out of this life, being related there, right there in the moment, rather than oh, it's all happened and what a terrible thing to happen. To actually, like, align with what's so, and tell him that I love him. If that's the last things I said, it would be great. And I don't mean like that wouldn't be done through some letting go process, some grief process. And I'm not there yet, so I don't know what is available. But those are the conversations with him that create him to know he can always call me. He can say anything to me. And that's that profound level of relating that I think is important. If I were to just do it, say, in therapy or with clients, that would be one thing. It would be something that I do. But if I can do it in my own life with my own relationships, it brings it all way home here. And not that it necessarily is going to make a difference to anybody or anything, just that it's one of the other possibilities rather than just pain and grief. And I've never lost a child, and I don't begin to undermine what that must feel like. So
yeah,
thank you for inviting me to talk about my children, because they're all, you know, I'm so proud of all of them. I don't think of a moment where I wish they were different. That's, again, looking beyond my beliefs of what a mother should and shouldn't be, and going towards being related no matter what.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question vulnerably. Yeah, that's beautiful. And what an access you have to something that could seem quite impossible for people to even consider, even have in their world, and to be confronted with. And I, conscious of what you were saying about body emotions, I wonder how I reacted when you said that, me having a son as well. And it is, to me, feels that you have some access to possibilities that are really unique, and it's really inspiring to think that we could all get to a place of inquiry, to be able to even start to look at that and how that would be in our world. So thank you very much.
I love it that you've had this conversation with me. So and whatever goes ahead publicly, it's for more thought, or for more feeling, and for more contribution. Thank you.
You're welcome. Lou, you were one of the first people to read my stories when I published them. And I would love to know how reading what a friend is putting out there into the world beyond what we have as private conversations, the impact that had on you. And you also mentioned to me that you wanted to share it with your daughter. I'm just really, really curious about how that was for you.
Well, I guess for me, as your friend, and as what is there is the privilege to read your about your life from your own viewpoint, the privilege that it was to, I guess, have a conversation start even inside of me, like the innocence of it, the innocence of how one relationship that's particularly prominent for you, how it developed, what were little endings, if you like, but what were also openings, if you like, and to really cherish that I got to explore that, even in just my own mind. There's a whole layer of Frances that didn't occur to me before that. There would be things in the face reading and in some of that work that we would talk about that would open into that. And like, whilst a lot of my work is about freeing myself or freeing people from their stories, like I said, just like beliefs, there's an access point there. Like what we normally hide and why does it take to read a book like that to get a new level of Frances? And sometimes it's not just about filling in gaps and getting to logic the person that I get to see in front of me these years later, but also it's so very innocent, and I can't get past the feeling of generosity that it was for you. I feel really grateful that you were willing to put, you know, vulnerable details about things to do with your past and write them out. And there's a layer of desiring to be seen, which is what I love about your series. You know, the things that people don't talk about, or, you know, beyond small talk. You know, it's so very delicious in the sense that you can be really more profoundly related. So from the point of view of a person that doesn't live just next door, doesn't have daily contact with you, but the willingness that you had to invite me into those stories, to hold them with you. And, you know, I'm all about exploring beyond those as well, but to actually hold them, it's like wrapping a baby in a bunny rug. Wrap the stories in the most lovely blanket that you yourself can hold them, because they're sometimes and very often the meat of those stories, or the proof, will be in the pudding of the person, like the physical form, shape, textures of the skin. Where there's resistance, and where there's expression, there's expression, and one might be a compensation for the other. So just being able to hold the stories like they're not going anywhere. They sit right there, and you have proof for them. You have a child from that relationship, and, you know, you became an auntie from that relationship as well. And no matter what the future is, there's this sense of fullness of life there within the story. So everything, you know, like for me to come on the screen today, just like I know nothing about you. And I've never known anything about you. And I have all these lovely stories to hold with you, not on your behalf, but with you. And then to look maybe beyond, you know, what Frances sees herself as, even, or saw herself as. It's just wonderful that you're having these conversations with people. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
I hope that did answer the question. It's sort of in there about you being generous, and how I feel about that is a great sense of gratitude, because it's not that I would feel lonely inside of what I do, but it's the generosity of the clients sometimes that gives me an appreciation of the diversity. And it probably goes back to areas where I myself was closed off, where I wouldn't normally share certain things. And, you know, for me, it's looking beyond what I think of as true to unfolding possibilities ahead. So thank you for your innocence.
Thank you. And as I wrote my stories, I tried to take myself back and be very much where I was. And each of those stories that I used to highlight what I was experiencing, because they are selected ones. There's not all of my life. There's things that I certainly haven't shared that are still here. But it's certainly given me a capacity to access a different connection with people. And even if we never talk about the book and never talk about the stories, it's actually opened something up. And I know that I've been seen by other people. And that was a lot of the motivation for me to be public with those type of parts of my life. And I'm very passionate about other people having that opportunity. And I know it's something that you do with your work as well. And so I know I'm attracted to people in my life or I attract them into my orbit because it continues to generate the conversation for me about how people do relate, get related and are seen and heard by each other. So it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you, Frances. It's been lovely being with you.
Big thank you to everyone who's joined us and our wonderful guests for being part of a bigger conversation for women. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you can stay on top of all of the episodes as we release them each week. And of course, there's a back catalogue there for you to enjoy whenever you have a chance. Please check out the show notes for more details and contacts. Follow us on social media and see what our fabulous guests are up to. Thank you again. Take care.